Hello, everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our live feed update for September 28th. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and I am here today to update you on everything that happened yesterday on the Big Brother 23 live feeds. It was day 83 in the house, and I've got some things to tell you. Let me tell you. I've got some things to tell you. We will not only be updating yesterday on the feeds, but I will also be running through Azah's game throughout Big Brother 23. So we will have some fun with that. And we're going to get into it all, right from the start for Azah all the way through to the end. But it seems as though we're going to start at the end here for Azah as we talk about day 83 in the house, because this does appear to be perhaps the end of her game. So let's talk about it. Yesterday on the feeds, Xavier has won part 1 of the final 3 HOH. Azah has won part 2 of the final 3 HOH. However, Azah and Big D have been getting into some arguments over the last few days, really over the last few weeks, as Big D has consistently been telling her that he wants to cut her, that he had a really hard time evicting Kyland over her, that he has a deal with Xavier, and that he was going to take Xavier to the end. And then yesterday, after he has been pestering her about whether she's going to take him to the end, she asked him, "Who do you want to be in the final 2, Big D?" And he said himself and Xavier. And he has said multiple times that he feels like he has carried her in the game, that she doesn't deserve to be in the final 2 spots. And he is upset with her because she dared ask him who he would have taken to the end. Why would she even ask him that? He didn't even win. It's not even something that he can decide anymore. She's just rubbing it in his face that he's not going to be able to take Xavier to the end. So yesterday, they wake up, and Big D, he's got some things to say to Azah. First thing in the morning. Look, I'm going to say this, Azah, and I'm going to make myself clear. All right? I want you to make the right decision for you. There's no point in you asking me questions because I didn't win. You walked into this knowing that me and Xavier had a final 2. You were cool with getting 3rd place. So that's how I looked at it. Okay? At the end of the day, I don't want anybody to take me that doesn't want to take me. I don't know what else you want me to say. I feel like you're making me say things that will hurt your feelings. And I don't want to hurt your feelings, so stop making me say these things. Okay? Just think about it. You know how I felt last week, Azah? And at this point, Azah finally says something. She said, "Big D, just stop. I don't think we should talk game anymore. I'd really just like to ask. I'd really just like to enjoy my week with you, this last week with you and here. I just think we shouldn't talk game. Okay? Can we please just drop it? Okay. All right. We'll drop it. I just wanted to say that how you felt last week is how I'm feeling now. Okay? So that's what I'm saying. I just feel like you used to be okay with the truth, and now you're not. So she's like, "Big D, I asked you from the bottom of your heart, who do you want in the final 2? Not who did you make a deal with? I've told you again and again, I'm fine, but you keep bringing it up. So what's going on, Big D?" Big D's like, for me, right now, I'm feeling like, was it smart for me to be honest with Azah? That's what I'm feeling. So Azah's like, what have I not told you? I have not said that I'm wavering. You're constantly questioning me. And I've told you over and over, I have not been wavering. I'm just giving you an example, Miss Azah. Okay? I'm just saying, like, when you, last week, When I was under Kylan, underneath Kylan, you were like, what are you doing? And now look at you, cuddling with Xavier all the time, underneath him. I'm just saying. That's all I'm saying, Miss Azah. I'm just telling you what it looks like. Azah says, you were feeling some type of way before I even asked that question yesterday. I was not feeling some type of way. Do not put words in my mouth. I was just stating facts. Okay. So that was the start of the day. Azah is going to talk to Xavier afterward and vent to him for a while about Big D. It's very interesting. I hope that you guys listened yesterday to the Xavier game recap, because I feel like there are multiple parts of it that are relevant to this particular update. One of which is his propensity to be offered things and him to just be like, cool. But Azah's going to vent to Xavier about Big D. And she says, hey, Xavier, have you thought more yet on who you want to take to the end? Because, oh boy. And Xavier basically is like, not really. No. Gives her nothing. It's like, okay, all right. I guess he doesn't want to have lifted a single finger to have made this happen. Okay, that's fine. Big D talks to Xavier. He vents to Xavier. I have been cradling Azah emotionally for the last 80 days, and this is how she repays me. I would so much rather Kylan were here. Xavier says, don't worry. I'm going to win and I'm going to take you. It doesn't matter what she's going to do. Azah talks to Xavier again a little bit later. She says, look, Xavier, I've been thinking, and I'm leaning toward taking you to the final two. Xavier's like, you think? Like, yeah. Cool. She says, and look, you can still take Big D. That's fine. I know I don't want you to break your deal. So I'm still going to pray on it, but that's where I'm leaning. Okay. So there you go. Azah now leaning toward taking Xavier to the end. And if this sticks, which it's looking like it will, then that's it. The game is done. But there's still some stuff to talk about, especially, again, relevant to the Xavier game recap yesterday. Azah, Big D, and Xavier are going to be talking in the kitchen. And Xavier is, of course, complaining about Tiffany. He really, Azah's really frustrating Xavier because Azah keeps trying to act like Tiffany is a good player, and Xavier just can't have that. He said specifically he can't have anybody defending Tiffany. He's not down for that. So he's going to explain to Azah why Tiffany is actually a really bad player. He says, first of all, she was going to target you for sure, and he is pacing because how dare Azah think that Tiffany's not a bad player? He says, if she played way too much. If she played on a different season, she would still fail. She's 100% Tiffany all the time. She'll get hot and she'll snap on somebody. That's just who she is. She just snaps on people all the time. He says she would have been, and no, this is not Big D saying this. This is Xavier saying this. He says she would have been target number 1 if it weren't for the cookout because of how she snapped on people. The only reason we just couldn't touch her because of the alliance. The cookout kept her safe because of that. There's so many times that we would have taken her out. The people would have taken her out. Because of all of her snapping on people. It would have been so easy Just think about like the HOHs, right? So then he starts to run through the HOHs, and he's like, so like, yeah, there was the well, okay, not that one, but then SB, no, she probably wouldn't have, and then no, not Claire, and then she won, okay, no, but and so he's realizing like, oh, actually, there weren't any opportunities to take Tiffany out. He's like, oh, but there would have been different HOHs because people wouldn't have been throwing. So it's that's how she would have gone. And I was just like, I guess so. I mean, I guess maybe she was more like a Christy from season 21, right? Like even if she did get into some altercations, like she still could have done well. X is like, no. She would never be able to turn it down, and in another season, they'd take her out because of that. So he says, she's like, all right, well, I just, and she turns it to Kai. She's like, well, I think that Kai could do well. Kai's, and Azah, like, this is pretty insightful. She says Kai's HOH in week 2 was more like a normal week 1 HOH because of how ridiculous the first week was, where he set himself up. And then it wasn't until his next HOH that he really started to rub people the wrong way. When Sarah Beth started doing her Moaning Myrtle stuff. We're going to talk about that in Azah's game recap. But that's when Azah started to get frustrated with Kyland, or at least more frustrated with Kyland. But his game actually was back and forth a few times. But Xavier, of course, he's going to bring it back to Tiffany. It's like, no, but think about this though. Everyone would want Tiffany. Azah says, but nobody was targeting Tiffany. Who was targeting Tiffany? How was she saved by the cookout? I don't understand. And X says, no. Look at it this way, right? Okay, right. Here are the people that she was in conflict with. He says, you've got she got into it with Big D and you, and which includes Brittany. She had differences with Alyssa. And she damn near hated SB. And then I mean not with Claire or Christian or Travis or the Christian. But like at least, I mean, look, that's 1, 2, 3 people she had conflict with outside of the cookout. So that's like 6 whole people that would have come after her. So yeah. So first of all, she didn't have conflict with Brittany outside of the wildcard situation. She mended that. Being in conflict with Big D and Tiffany and Azah did not lead to conflict with Brittany, as he claims. She had 0 differences with Alyssa. In fact, Alyssa trusted Tiffany and wanted to go to the end with Tiffany more than Xavier, up until Tiffany had to stab Christian in the back. And even then, she was not after Tiffany. She was never after Tiffany. And despite damn near hating SB trusted Tiffany more than almost anybody in the house, all the way until Tiffany evicted her. So, yeah. Of course, Xavier knows none of that. Big D says, "Oh, watch out, Xavier. You don't want to make her out to be an angry black woman." Xavier's like, "Whoa, I'm not trying to do that." He's like, "I don't know. Sounds like an angry black woman to me." And this is again a perfect representation of Xavier and Big D in the game, where like Xavier says ridiculous things, and then Big D comes in with a wrecking ball saying way worse things, and it makes Xavier's things sound better in comparison. Oh man. Xavier says, look, she ruined it. She had a good social game and she ruined it. Big D says, yeah, everyone after the storage room, everyone saw her for who she was. And X says, exactly. She would have been my top target after that, because how dare you talk to Big D like that? X says, she would have been gone pre-jury without the cookout. Pre-jury. He says, I was in a very good position until week 5 or week 6. So I know for sure that I would have made the jury and she would not have. Again, please listen to the Xavier game recap with Tiffany protecting Xavier week after week. Tiffany never a target to anyone. Okay. Azah says, well, I don't know. I feel like when Tiffany got into it with me, I feel like everyone took her side. No? X, who took Tiffany's side, says, nope. Nope. Tiffany would go so quick if she came back. If she played again, she would be gone so quick. You know who else would go quick? Derek X. Goes. He'd be gone so quick. Alyssa, if she came back, she'd do great. She'd do fine. Big D says, oh, Frenchie. Frenchie will come back. He'll do great. And they're like, would Frenchie come back? It's like, yeah, Frenchie's a fan favorite. They'll give him like a Paul situation. And then they talk about Frenchie, and X is like, yeah, Frenchie would have stayed. He would have gone after Tiffany for sure. He wouldn't have gone after me. Frenchie was going after him, and he trusted Tiffany a lot. So, great reads by Xavier. Anyway, Azah says to the cameras a little bit later, she says, I just don't think Xavier should get third. It hit me some type of way that Big D told me that I don't deserve to sit in the final two. It hit me some type of way, and I'm not feeling great about it. And I got to tell Big D. So she goes and she grabs Big D, and she says, "Look, Big D, I've been thinking, and I think I want to take Xavier to the end. I don't want him to get third place, and he's doing it for his nephew, and I feel like, I felt like I wanted to take my best friend. I felt like that all this time, but I don't even know if you are. I don't know if you feel the same way. It doesn't seem like it. It feels like you keep telling me that I'm not. Plus, Big D, you're gonna get America's favorite anyway. So, there's that." Big D this whole time is like, yep, okay, all right, okay, all right. And then she says, okay, so I don't want to get into a fight or anything. Okay, yeah. Well, I guess it's clear that I made the wrong choice last week. It's fine. I'm not gonna say anything. It's not like I'm not here for my sick mother, but it's fine. It's, I don't care. Just you do you. I do feel like after everything you've told me about, liking him, and it's it's hard not to sit here and feel like it's not for those reasons. She says, look, the thing is, I've been feeling this the whole time, that I want to be there with my best friend, but I just don't feel like you feel the same way. And it hurts me that I feel like my friend doesn't even think I deserve to be here. He says, that's not true. That's not true. Kylan thought that, not me. Kylan is the one. He said, Big D, you told me that you don't respect my gameplay. It's like, it's not like, no. I mean, what? I'm just being honest with you. I could have done. He says, what you're doing is what I would have done last week if I had been emotional. Now, coincidentally, now here in Final 3, you're having all this alone time with him, all cuddled up, having deep conversations, and you're getting all emotional. He says, now I look like a dummy because I took my friend to the Final 3. But, you made it clear when it comes to men, you have a hard time making decisions like that. You were supposed to be all about women, and then you give up the win for a man. But I'm not trying to be harsh. It's just how I see it. He says, and you keep asking me about who I would take. I have to honor the deals that I made. I can't go back on that. That's why I can't say that I would have taken X. I wouldn't have taken X. I would not have done that. I would not have kept you if I had known that you cuddling up and getting emotional with him Just Big D, the reason I've changed my mind is because of the past week of conversations with you. It has nothing to do with Xavier. You hurt my feelings. You think I don't deserve to be here. Okay? That's not true. I've made it clear. She says, "Look, I just need to process this, okay?" Says, "All right, well, okay, it's up to you. I mean, it seems like you've made up your mind, but okay, it's fine. If you don't want to take me, I don't want you to take me. So, and you're welcome, by the way, because you're here." And he walks out. Best social game of all time, Big D. Big D goes to Xavier, and he says, "Obviously, I should have kept Kyland. Wow. Unbelievable." Xavier's like, "How would that be better? Kyland wasn't going to take you." It's like, at least Kyland would have deserved it. Now you don't even need to win, Xavier. Xavier's like, "That's not true. I do need to win. I need to win so I can take you. So you can get that check." I feel played. I got played. That's it. She played me. Hell, even Tiffany, me saying Tiffany, even Tiffany deserved it more than me and Azah. He knows. He's known all along. He says, you know what? I'm not speaking to her for the rest of the time that we're here. That's it. Not speaking to her. I'm gonna sleep in Coral tonight. And he doesn't. He sleeps in the Coral. He doesn't talk to her. Azah talks to Xavier a little bit later. She says they talk some more. She vents some more. Azah says to Xavier, "Look, the way I see it, if God wanted me to win this, then if God wants me to win this, then it doesn't matter who I sit next to. I can sit next to anybody. If God wants me to win, I'll win. If he doesn't want me to win, I won't win." So that's how I feel about it. And she says, and I would have stayed true to my deal with him. I really would have. I felt like I had a deal with him, but he keeps telling me that we didn't have a deal. So there's no deal to stay true to. So just like that, Azah intends to take Xavier to the final two, even if she wins part 3 of the final 3 HOH. And just like that, Azah has guaranteed her loss. Big D really coming through. I mean, I made the proclamation that Big D was perhaps the worst player of all time like a month or two ago. And Big D's really coming through for me here, because he has somehow managed to talk his way out of second place. I've never seen somebody like Azah is legitimately giving up a guaranteed win in order to spite Big D because of how bad he has been to her. It's unbelievable what we're seeing here. Never in the history of the show has anything like that come close to happening. But Azah has decided she essentially does not want to win this game. But how did we get here? This is the part of the movie where it freeze frames on Azah being like, "If God wanted me to win this, then I'll win this either way. So I'm taking Xavier." Freeze frame. You might be wondering, how did I get here? Well, let's go back. Let's talk through Azah's game here. And hopefully we can do like a timestamp on this one because there was a lot of update. But let's talk through Azah's game here through the season of Big Brother 23. Azah entered the game here in week 1 on the Joker's team, where Frenchie won HOH. She was safe week 1. Big result. I mean, Frenchie is HOH. She's on the safe team. She wanted to target the winner of the first HOH. As she talked about with Xavier on day 83, she recognized the power of the first HOH and that they're usually able to set themselves up. And so she intended to target the person who won the first HOH, but the person who won the first HOH was on her team, Frenchie. And so she was like, well, there goes that strategy. The cookout is immediately formed here in week 1 without Hannah. And we get a lot of stuff going on with Frenchie. Again, I'll repeat what I said about the Xavier recap. Obviously, Azah was very much not a part of much of the strategy, the actual game of Big Brother. So I will try to give you as much context as I can without overly repeating myself from Xavier's. I'll try to make it as relevant to Azah as possible, but trying to tell a coherent narrative about the season. Doing that is a little difficult, so bear with me. Frenchie starts making a bunch of alliances and plans. He's got the eulogy plan in motion to backdoor Brent. He's got the older person alliance. He's got this thing with the women. He's got the Jokers. He has about 5 different versions of the slaughterhouse. Azah is actually included in many of these initial conversations about the targets and the alliances. And her and Brittany are actually 2 of the first people to be approached about the slaughterhouse. In fact, fun fact, on night 1, it was Brittany that first brought up the slaughterhouse, and we believed that Brittany was the originator of the slaughterhouse. However, things don't work out super well, right? Frenchie has all of these versions of the slaughterhouse. He's got a version with the women. He's got a version with the men and the butchers. He's got a couple of other versions. And Oz is like right in there with him for the most part. It's not until this is the moment where Frenchie sort of lands on the men version of the slaughterhouse primarily. He approaches Azah and Sarah Beth and Brittany and a few of the other women in the game, and he asks them if they would be willing to be a pawn for him in his plot to, do all of his things, right? And they say no, they don't want to be a pawn. And he goes, "What? Ungrateful. They don't want to step up." And so Frenchie shuts them out. And he moves forward with a different version of the slaughterhouse. We talked a lot about this. This was a big moment for him in week 1. But this is where Azah, that brief period of time where Azah was like in there with the power, it ends here and it never comes back. That is the end of Azah's proximity to power, right there. Kylan is then going to throw Derek X under the bus about his comments about Whitney. Frenchie's not pleased about it. Frenchie ends up bonding with Brent, no longer wants Brent out. Brent tells him the Christian's the real enemy, so now he wants Christian out. But then Christian wins the wildcard competition, and Frenchie starts blaming Derek X for why he was going after Christian. Azah also actually gets in on this. She tells Frenchie not to trust Christian because he's been trying to make an alliance with Whitney. Frenchie is like, what? So he actually starts, Azah was actually helped the target move back onto Christian, and thus Alyssa, but Brent really comes in there as well. Brent was also upset about the idea that Christian was trying to start an alliance with Whitney. It was part of why Brent was going after Christian, although the main reason was that he was with Alyssa. Derek X starts to get worried, tries to figure out a way that he should pitch to Frenchie that somebody else should go on the block. He approaches Kylan about it. Frenchie confronts Derek X about his shadiness. DX admits to it, thinking that he's talking about the plan to approach Frenchie. Derek X becomes a social pariah. Frenchie gets pissed at Kylan for being part of it. And Azah, in the meantime, is kind of feeling upset that she feels like she's been boxed out of Frenchie's regime here. She says, he's playing for Twitter. Huh. What's going on? Tiffany lets Kylan know that they need to include Hannah in the cookout, but Azah is not really down for that, and she's going to continue to not be down for that for some weeks to come. Frenchie clears the air with Derek X and Travis. He's going to give them one more chance. Brent has him, again, looking at Christian. So Frenchie is worried about Alyssa and Christian being in a showmance, and he nominates Alyssa and Kylan being the pawn, and Alyssa being the bait. Gotta catch the big fish. So Alyssa ends up confronting Frenchie, and he blames Derek X for all the anti-Christian and Alyssa sentiment. Derek X becomes the new target. But then Brent tries to recalibrate the target back onto Travis because he wants to keep his teammate Derek X safe. He feels like he's got one over on Derek X now. Got him in his pocket. So Azah, of course, is just trying to keep Kylan around because Kylan's part of the cookout. And she also is going to create her own alliance, something that was unfortunately absent from Xavier's game recap. Azah creates the Kingslayers. She approaches Tiffany, and Tiffany approaches Claire, and they create the Kingslayers. Tiffany, Claire, Brittany, and Azah. It's not a very long-lived alliance. She says much later in the game this week, she says that she ultimately decided not to move forward with the Kingslayers because she knew that with the cookout and everything, that she wanted to play an honest game. She didn't want to have conflicting allegiances and make deals with other people. So she ends up not moving forward with this alliance, but it existed. Derek X ends up winning the veto, and this is exactly what Brent wanted. He pushes Travis again. Brent encourages Derek X to use the veto on Kylan. Derek X wants to, and that even if that means sacrificing Travis. Azah confronts Frenchie about being left out of the loop, and he promises that he'll keep her more in the loop. Not the Fruit Loop. Frenchie has changed his mind, though, and wants Kylan out. But he fails to convince Derek X to change his mind. Brent gets him back on board. There's a confrontation with Kylan, all that stuff going down. Kylan decides that he wants. So this is actually an interesting thing, right? So Frenchie tells Kylan that he wants the veto used on Alyssa, and Kylan is not pleased. Frenchie says, "Oh, he popped off on me," and they get into it. The following morning, Kylan wakes up, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but Kylan actually decided that he wanted the veto to be used on Alyssa in order to get trust back with Frenchie. And he told Derek X, "I want you to use the veto on Alyssa." Derek X was like, "I don't want to do that," but he was like, "I feel like this is the right move for me." Kylan talked to Big D and Azah about it. And Azah actually is the one to talk him out of it. She says, "No, don't do that. That's putting an unfair burden on us because now we're going to have to vote to save you if you stay up on the block. You need to have that veto used on you." This argument convinces him that he should not have the veto used on Alyssa. He goes back to Derek X and he tells him, "Never mind. I want the veto used on me." So Derek X uses the veto on Kylan, and Travis goes up as the replacement. Azah talks to Xavier about some strategy. She says that she wants Brent to go home next. She talks to Tiffany about wanting to keep Derek X around, even though he is a social pariah right now and everyone else seems to want him out. She would like for Derek X to stick around. Tiffany agrees. So again, here in week one, Azah actually a little bit more on top of some things and has goals that actually happen. Frenchie is then going to create French Kisses, the all-women's alliance plus Frenchie. And then he rats it out. But Azah also ratted it out to Brittany. and Big D. When she tells Big D about the French Kisses alliance, he says, "Oh, you should not do that. That's bad. You shouldn't work with the women. That's a bad move." Brittany tells the cameras here in week 1 that Azah is her number 1 in the game, and that never really changes. Azah talks with Tiffany and Claire about the possibility of there being a big alliance in the game. She thinks that there's something happening there. They agree. They've been thinking the same thing. Azah is actually the one who says it probably includes most of the guys, and if you think about it, it probably also includes the women that weren't included in the French Kisses alliance. He was probably covering his bases with that, right? So they agree. This is the seed of them figuring out Slaughterhouse, and Azah was right there at the core of it. Say what you will about Azah and her will to win the game. Her perception in the game is considerably better than certainly Xavier's, certainly Big D's. She is the person who has always more accurately read the house and more accurately perceived what was happening in the house than really a lot of people in the house. And of course, she had the cookout advantage over anybody not in the cookout. But even within the cookout, she perceived the house better than Hannah did for most of the game. Way better than Xavier and Big D. And Kyland is Kyland, but so there was that. They agree Frenchie and Brent need to be the next ones gone, and Travis is then going to be voted out of the game. And we head into week 2, where Kyland wins the HOH. Azah is concerned for Frenchie's safety. Now, she wants Brent out. It was Claire and Tiffany that were like, hey, Frenchie also needs to go, but she would prefer that Brent goes, not Frenchie. Azah is concerned for Frenchie's safety. She wants him to be able to compete in the wildcard competition to save himself. Ideally, Frenchie wins that wildcard competition, and Brent is the one that goes home instead of Frenchie. And this is where she really starts to get separated from the other players in the game, particularly Tiffany and Claire, who she had been working with, because she really is going to ride for Frenchie. This is where it really starts to become obvious that Azah is much more of a loyal player than she is a game player. And I think it's also something that she learned about herself this week. So this is when Tiffany, Claire, and DX fully figure out the slaughterhouse. And Tiffany pitches to Kyland that they want their own power alliance with the Kings plus Derek X. Sarah Beth then wins the wildcard competition. Frenchie says, F the slaughterhouse. SB tells the Kings about Frenchie ratting out the slaughterhouse, which is a lie, and gets them to split up. Tiffany tells Christian he can't be a king if he works with the slaughterhouse. If you want to be a king, you got to work with us. Kyland then nominates Frenchie and Brittany. The slaughterhouse crumbles. Frenchie is the scapegoat, and the remains scatter. Derek X is exonerated in the process, and Azah is upset because Brittany is on the block, and she was not told what was happening there. Why is Brittany on the block? What's going on? And why does it have to be her team? She doesn't want Frenchie to go. She doesn't like this. So when Derek X wins the veto, Frenchie comes up with a plan to get Brent out instead of himself. He's pitching that the veto should be used on him to put Brent up on the block. And he brings this idea to Azah, who says, okay, here we go. I'm going to pitch this I'm going to help Frenchie pitch this. She goes to Tiffany and she pitches Frenchie's plan. She says, I really think we should keep Frenchie around. I think Brent is the better target. I think the veto should be used. Tiffany is like, no, I don't think this is the move, Azah. I don't know why you're sticking with Frenchie of all people. Azah feels like she is being left behind in the game. The people that she was talking with before all seem set on taking Frenchie out, which is her ally. Brittany's on the block and she's feeling powerless. She gets frustrated with Tiffany that she won't even listen to her idea about keeping Frenchie. So that's happening. Big D is going to approach Azah saying, this is just a moment that happens. He says that Derek X needs to go. And she says, no, he doesn't. Big D, he's fine. Christian and Alyssa are going to get showmancy, and Oz is going to bond with Derek X over the course of the week. She develops a good personal relationship with him, which is something that, again, one of her strong suits in the game. She develops these close personal relationships with other players in the game. She tells Big D that she really thinks that after Frenchie, Brent and Whitney need to go. And she also lets Big D know that the jury is 9 people and not 7. Azah is going to then correct Brent in a conversation about what it means to be a floater versus a coaster. She explains to him, no, that's not floating, that's coasting. He takes offense to it, and he decides that Azah is his target now. So Azah is now being targeted. Brittany tells Azah that she doesn't trust Hannah. Big D says she thinks she should trust Hannah. But Hannah, she gives her nothing. Brittany also doesn't trust Xavier. And Azah tries to point Brittany in the direction of Brent. Brent is the one to worry about, but ultimately Azah and Big D never really had a lot of control over where Brittany was looking, and she was looking a lot at Xavier this week. And she was always looking at Hannah. This is the week that, of course, the Royal Flush officially forms, and as does the Mafia. And Azah actually tries to, make some kind of deal between the Jokers and the Queens, but it doesn't really go anywhere because the Jokers never really had any power. So Frenchie is then evicted, and we head into week 3, where Xavier wins the HOH. The plan was for the Aces to throw the HOH to the Kings so that they could take Brent out of the game, which is exactly what Azah wants, so she's cool with this. This is when Tiffany and Kylan solidify their final 2. And Xavier as HOH, it wants to nominate Brittany and Brent in order to take Brent out of the game. And the plan is to throw the wildcard competition to the Queens so that Brittany and Whitney and Brent will not be safe. So all that's happening, again, outside of Azah's sphere. And this is really when this is the week where Azah really gets left completely out of the game and starts to just kind of like exist in her own bubble. Big D is going to propose. Big D goes to Azah. He says, I don't like the direction of this game either. I think that we need to have a cookout meeting for the first time. We need to get the cookout together and have a meeting. Azah's like, okay, all right. I could see that. Yeah, maybe we do need a meeting because I don't like the direction this is going. He says, yes, exactly. We need to have a meeting so that we can all agree that the women need to go. A woman needs to go next. She's like, oh. It's like, yeah, all 6 of us. She's like, 6 of us? There's 5 of us. He's like, no, Hannah. No, Hannah's not a part of the cookout, Big D. It's the cookout plus Hannah. Still feels that way. Tiffany then wins the wildcard competition, but Azah is very, very upset about it. She doesn't like how it went down because she feels bad for Brittany. She feels out of the loop, and she decides that she wants to go up on the block instead of Brittany. She doesn't feel like it is the right thing to do to put Brittany on the block. And Xavier says no. Xavier is, by the way, very upset with Azah in this situation. He does not take Azah's side over Tiffany, as he claimed there on day 83. He was very much on Tiffany's side. He was frustrated with Azah. He did not appreciate that she was trying to interfere with his HOH. And this was where most people in the game, in fact, did, as Azah said, side with Tiffany here. Alyssa starts targeting Azah because she sees her as an emotional player after this, and doesn't want her on the jury. Brent is, of course, still targeting Azah, or at least was still targeting Azah prior to being nominated. And a lot of other people in the game are looking at Azah as somebody that they do not want to work with. So Azah says, so Xavier nominates Brent and Brittany. Azah tells Big D that she now wants to target Claire and Derek X because they're working with Tiffany and Kylan and Xavier, and she doesn't want them to have any people. They should have gone on the block. Tiffany says Tiffany and Derek X try doing damage control with her, but it does not work. Azah is very upset, and she wants their pieces gone, which is not really. Again, this is where her game really what what there was of her game really just kind of goes, okay. Um, she's not really here to play for herself. She's here to play for her team. And if you're not, good with her team, then she's not good with you. Alyssa, this again decides to target Azah. Christian wins the veto. And Tiffany starts pulling Hannah in, much to Azah's dismay. And Derek X starts trying to get people to target Xavier. The detectives are formed with Derek X, Tiffany, Claire, and Kyland. Through Derek X's work, most of the house is coming around to the idea of targeting the Kings next week, primarily Xavier. Him and Tiffany try to warn Hannah that she's in danger, but she doesn't believe it. Tiffany and Kyland start to wonder if they should go their own way in the game. They talk about how they would choose Claire over somebody like Azah, who is not willing to play ball. However, Tiffany wakes up the next morning after having a dream. She can't go against the cookout. She's decided to take a different path, one that's harder, but she thinks with the new master plan, they can get all 6 of the cookout to the final 6. So prior to this, it has only ever been, let's look out for each other. But now it's the final 6 to the final 6. And she pitches it to Azah, but Azah's still not really having it here with Tiffany. She's like, she talks down to me. She's acting like this is a new thing. I don't appreciate it. And Big D tells her, you got to put a face on, Azah. You got to just smile. This is also the week where Azah accidentally slips, and it's her that accidentally gives Hannah the name The Cookout. And she's very upset with herself because of that. So Brent is then going to be voted out, and we head into week 4, where Kristen wins the HOH. And the plan is to target Hannah here. And this is dangerous because it could expose the cookout. And this is all Xavier's fault. Azah tells Kristen that she would have put him up on the block if she had won, which is only further confirmation to Kristen and Alyssa that they should eventually target Azah, even though she's not enough of a threat right now. Claire wins the wildcard competition, and Kristen has a meeting with the Jokers where he asks them what he should do, who he should target. The Jokers encourage him to target Whitney. They think Whitney is the best shot to take right now. Azah, having cooled down from the previous week, is back to wanting Brent and then Whitney out of the game, which is what she had talked about with Tiffany a few times, and it's what she wants to have happen right now. So they encourage Kristen to target Whitney. After his meeting with the Jokers, Kristen says, well, that just convinced me to target Hannah even more. All the Jokers are targeting Whitney. Why would I do it for them? Jokers did not exactly help out the situation. Hannah ends up saving herself with Christian and Alyssa, and that helps the cookout dramatically here, as they do not have to expose themselves to protect Hannah. Azah is actually the intended replacement nominee if Whitney wins the veto. So if Whitney wins this veto, Azah goes up next to Hannah, and it's game over for the cookout, which is part of why it was a bad idea to convince them to put Hannah up in the first place, because Hannah would not have been the replacement nominee if it had been something else. But anyway, Azah is then going to have to talk Big D down because Alyssa tells Big D that Hannah dropped his name. Big D gets super pissed at Hannah, and he decides he wants to put Hannah on the block if he wins the HOH. Azah has to talk him down, saying, no, that's not a good idea. Christian ends up winning the veto. Tiffany has officially changed her final 2 to Hannah at this point, and she has convinced a lot of people to go after Sarah Beth. But Azah is not one of those people. Azah's not down to target Sarah Beth. She thinks that Sarah Beth is she feels close to Sarah Beth. She's worked with Sarah Beth a little bit. She's talked to Sarah Beth a little bit. She doesn't want to do that. She's also going to argue with Azah with Tiffany about Hannah's inclusion in the cookout. She does not think that Hannah should be a part of the cookout, and she does not agree with Tiffany that Sarah Beth should go next. And so their game relationship really continues to flounder here. They're not ever going to target each other, but they are not working very well together anymore. Now, with a lot of the house going after Sarah Beth, including Xavier, Kyland actually manages to flip Derek X to target Christian instead. Derek X, who was looking at SB and even Xavier, still at this point, Kyland is the one that really gets him over onto Christian. Hannah then goes to Azah to try to warn Azah that Christian thinks that she's coming for him and that him and Alyssa are coming for Azah next. Hannah has been told now by Tiffany that Azah is not really on board with her being part of the cookout. And Hannah has this information that Christian and Alyssa are targeting Azah. Alyssa because she doesn't want Azah as an emotional juror. Christian because Azah told him to his face that she would have nominated him. So that's a perfect excuse. She is their target at this point. And Hannah thinks, I'll give Azah an olive branch here, and I'll let her know. I'll give her this information to warn her that Christian and Alyssa are in trouble here. Are trouble for her. So she tells Azah, they're coming for you. And Azah says, I don't believe you. And they have some tense interactions. Azah's still not really on board with Hannah here. I said that Azah was more perceptive than Xavier and Big D, but it's not saying much. Azah bonds with Claire a bit here in week 4 in particular, as Claire is trying to work her into targeting Sarah Beth. Claire manages to make more progress than Tiffany did here with Azah, talking about Sarah Beth and why Sarah Beth may need to go. So Derek X is also going to talk to Claire about Azah. He says he likes Azah as a person, but she talks like no game, so she's hard to trust. Brittany wants to flip the vote the morning of the eviction against Hannah, but Azah actually shuts Brittany down. So Brittany does not attempt to flip the vote, and Whitney is voted out. So that's actually a bit of a key moment there as well, because there was actually some movement for Whitney, and if Brittany had pitched it to Christian and Alyssa, things might have gotten a little tricky. But we head into week 5, where Derek X wins the HOH, and Azah says at first that she trusts Derek X and she's willing to go up as a pawn for him if he needs one. Alyssa and Christian are still coming after her at this point, and they're hoping that they can get her out of the game. Azah tells Derek X that she has changed her mind, actually. She does not want to be a pawn in the game, and she gives no Fs anymore. So instead, she makes a 2-week deal with him so she wouldn't go up on the block. Derek X ends up nominating Brittany and Sarah Beth, and then Brittany wins the veto. This time, Azah is not super concerned about Brittany going up on the block. She's accepted that that's kind of Brittany's fate in the game. But Brittany wins the veto, and she's very happy for her. Azah, at this point, has been convinced that Christian is the right person to go after at this point. He is too good at competitions, and she talks to Derek X about it and agrees that she will vote Christian out. So Christian goes up on the block as the replacement, and when he campaigns to Azah, she does not let him know that she is not a vote for him to stay. She keeps him in the dark. Her bond with Claire is continuing to develop, and Claire has her finally feeling like Sarah Beth should be targeted. And Claire makes this happen by telling Azah that Sarah Beth has been talking smack about Brittany. And it's at this point that Azah says, Sarah Beth, she's just like a moaning myrtle. And she goes to Kyland and she says, Kyland, you gotta stop trying to protect Sarah Beth, because she's a moaning myrtle. And then Kyland runs it right back to Sarah Beth. And then she gets very frustrated with Kyland, that Kyland is protecting Sarah Beth. That was Claire's work. So Tiffany is annoyed that the Jokers are not owning up to their Christian votes, because it's putting her in a tougher spot. And so she confronts them about it, and they have that big confrontation that we all know about. Big D threatens to blow up the cookout. I'm done. F the cookout. Azah has to talk him down. Azah has to be like, Big D, calm down. It's okay. We're gonna be okay. People keep saying, oh, X was the glue that kept the cookout together, except it's Azah here that talks Big D down every time he freaks out. Azah tells the cameras that she can't trust Tiffany to keep things to herself, but she's never going to turn on the cookout. She just wants them all to get along. So Azah does let Christian know that she's not voting to keep him. At which point, Tiffany tries to flip the vote. Azah's not down for it. Tiffany thinks they can get Brittany, but when she does, when she tries to grab Brittany, it leads to drama. Big D and Azah follow Brittany up into the HOH room, and X and Tiffany agree that they can't flip the vote with Azah and Big D so adamantly opposed. So Christian ends up voted out this week. We head into week 6. So in week 6, Kyland wins the HOH, and he was not supposed to, which makes the cookout very upset because Sarah Beth is the one that was supposed to go, and Kyland was supposed to throw the HOH. In particular, he was supposed to throw the HOH to Azah. And so Azah is particularly upset about Kyland not throwing this. She talks to Kyland about it, and it goes very poorly. He is very condescending, as Kyland tends to be. He talks about spirals, and it spirals. They're very frustrated with each other. Kyland afterward is like, Tiffany was right. You just can't work with Azah. And when Kyland has his one-on-one meetings and asks questions, Azah trolls him with her answers, saying that Frenchie is the most influential player in the game. Kyland then nominates Claire and Big D with the intention of backdooring Alyssa until the high roller twist is introduced, at which point Azah gets $50 and does not play in the high roller competition. And then Brittany gets $100. When people find out that Brittany gets $100, Tiffany and Xavier and Kyland all agree that Brittany is the one that should go because she has too much money. Azah and Hannah, though, think that Claire should not be the one to go, or Brittany. They think that Alyssa should still be the one to go. They try to talk to Kyland about it, but Kyland is set on the idea of Brittany because she's got that $100. At this point, Hannah and Tiffany talk about their ideal final 3. Tiffany would like to bring all of the women to the final 3. Hannah doesn't want Azah there. She wants X there at this point in the game. At this point in the game, it is Alyssa that wins the veto, and that is going to seal Brittany's fate. Derek X approaches Azah with a theory that there's a big alliance in the house, and this concerns her, and she goes, okay, I guess Derek X needs to go soon because he's going to catch on. He's going to figure us out. Big D lets her know that Brittany is going to go up on the block, and she gets upset. He thinks that they should try to get Derek X on the block, but Azah says that's not possible. I think we're just going to have to let Brittany go. Xavier is going to mediate a healing session between Azah and Tiffany, and they do feel better afterwards. But again, they were never going to turn on each other anyway. Alyssa is then going to use the veto on Claire. Brittany goes up, and Brittany again is now fate sealed here. Azah has a plan for the following week, though. They're all talking about this roulette twist. Her plan is that she wants to nominate 2 cookout members to increase the odds of a cookout member getting the roulette twist and taking one of them down, and decreasing the odds of a cookout member being the rouletted nominee. She talks to Big D and Xavier about it, and they both tell her that that's a dumb idea. She then talks about it with them in the final 3, and they tell her again, no, that was a dumb idea. Azah asks if Big D has a final 2 with Xavier. It's this week here in week 6 that she asks him, and he says, yes, I do have a final 2 with Xavier. And she says, okay, can I get in on that? And he says, I'll ask Xavier. And he asks Xavier, and Xavier says, no. But Big D goes back to Oz, and he says, yeah, we're cool. So this becomes her new endgame plan. She's starting to recognize, she's starting to feel like she's okay coming in third. She's feeling like, look at my game to this point. She's done nothing. I've done nothing, she thinks. I've been helping the cookout with what I can, but this is not my game to win. I'm okay if my story here is to just help somebody else's story, blossom, whether it's the cookout or, an individual within the cookout. I want to, help Big D as much as possible. I want to help the cookout as much as possible. That's just what I'm here for. So Brittany's voted out, and we head into week 7, where Sarah Beth wins the HOH, just seconds over Derek X, who definitely would have been going after Xavier here. Sarah Beth wants to nominate Xavier as well, and go after Xavier. But when she talks to Azah pretends that she's going after Kyland. This is when Azah's like, I didn't lie in the game until I lied to Hannah. Like, you lied. So you also lied to other people, not in the cookout. Kyland then stays up all night with Sarah Beth, convincing her that Derek X should be the target, with Claire as the pawn, and so she nominates Claire and Big D. Hannah then convinces Derek X not to play in the roulette competition. Alyssa plays and wins instead, and she takes Big D down off the block, and Xavier goes up in his place. Xavier then wins the veto. Derek X goes up on the block. And Azah, to this point, is very okay with Derek X leaving. Again, she's worried that he's going to figure it out based on the conversations that he's had with her. However, when Tiffany pitches to Azah Tiffany is going to pitch to Azah that she thinks that the women of the cookout need to work together, but Azah's not super receptive to this idea. She's already made this deal with Big D and Xavier to go to Final 3, and she can't go back on that. Tiffany was late by like four or 5 days here. If she had approached Azah earlier, who knows? But Derek X is going to pitch to Azah that she should keep him in the game. All he cares about is helping his friends get further in the game, because he knows that he can't win himself. This really resonates with Azah because it's exactly how she feels in the game. And so she decides that she wants to keep Derek X. She pitches it to Xavier. Xavier says no. So instead, she goes to Hannah, who also says no. And that was the end of that. Azah is then going to tell us about her Fruit Loop system, which I thought was going to be more important to this game recap, until she decided that she wanted to take Xavier to the end, and now it doesn't really matter about her Fruit Loops. Derek X is then going to be voted out, and we head into week 8, where Tiffany wins the HOH. Now, Azah has been working more closely with Tiffany since their reconciliation, but she is still going to opine over X, talk about how handsome he is, and how she really thinks that there's something that could happen outside of the house. And Big D's like, dude, no. Tiffany ends up nominating Sarah Beth and Kyland. Sarah Beth is the intended target. And Hannah comes up with a plan to get Claire to use to win the Coin of Destiny. So Claire does win the Coin of Destiny. She nominates Sarah Beth and Kyland. Xavier goes up as the third nominee based on the veto competition that he won the week before. Hannah wins the veto. She uses it on Xavier. Azah, at this point, is pissed at Kyland because Kyland wanted the veto to be used on him, and she, with everybody else, is like, what is he doing? Why does he want the veto used on him? This guy's annoying. We got to get him out first. So Azah's target at the 6 is Kyland. That has not been changing. And she wants Alyssa to go next week. She does not agree that Claire should go next. She thinks that Alyssa should go next. But of course, her opinion doesn't matter to the men of the cookout, because to the men of the cookout, everybody wanted Claire out next. Sarah Beth is then voted out, and we head into week 9, where Tiffany wins the HOH again, and Xavier is pissed. That just cost her $750,000. Azah, though, is not upset. She really didn't want Kai to win, so she's happy that Tiffany did. Tiffany puts Alyssa and Xavier up on the block, and Tiffany tries again to convince Azah that she should come to the end with the women, but Azah says no. She's not down for it. Alyssa wins the veto, and that means that Tiffany has to put Claire on the block, and that is very difficult for her. Azah comforts Tiffany about how difficult it must have been, and Tiffany really appreciates Azah's heart. Big D and Azah get into a fight about who's done more in the game. Azah really thinks that Tiffany should have been able to tell Claire the truth, and she thinks that the vote should go a certain way in order to keep Alyssa in the dark if they're not going to tell the truth. But she keeps getting shut down over and over by Xavier and Big D, and so she gets into a fight with Big D, who is particularly rude to her, which again is quite important given the day's events on day 83. And Claire is then going to be voted out, and we head into week 10. And it's double eviction, baby! Hannah wins the HOH. She nominates Xavier and Alyssa. Xavier wins the veto. Hannah replaces him with Kyland, and Alyssa is voted out. Now, if Azah had won this HOH, she would have just gone after Alyssa as well. Wouldn't have particularly mattered. But so I was thinking of the next HOH. In week 11, Kyland wins the HOH. We've made it to the final 6. The cookout is here. Kyland is the HOH, and had Tiffany not fallen out of favor with Kyland, he was intending to target Azah here, and Azah would have gone home, but he has decided that Tiffany no longer deserves to win. He's been canoodling with her, and I guess that means she can't deserve to win. He makes a deal with Azah that if he doesn't nominate her, she can't nominate him, and she accepts the deal. So Azah has now made a deal with the devil, and she is now not able to nominate Kyland next week if he stays. Now, he had approached her the week before about potentially working together, and she was slightly opened up by that conversation, primed to accept this kind of deal. Kyland is then going to form the gentleman with Xavier, who's like, cool. Kyland is going to nominate Tiffany and Hannah, and Big D says, hey, Azah, with Tiffany going home, I just want to remind you that I'm not taking you to the final 2. You know that, right? So when I cut you for Xavier, you can't be mad, right? And she's like, yeah, it's cool. I know the deal. Big D yesterday was like, you're not allowed to be mad. You said you were cool with it. Kyland wins the veto. And now that she's made this deal with Kyland, Azah feels like she has to go after Hannah next. And if she wins the HOH, she's going to have to put Hannah and Xavier on the block because she can't put Kyland on the block. And she wants Hannah to go because of all the deals that she's made. At this point, again, in the game, she has expressed to Tiffany that the way she feels about the game is that she can't win the game. She just wants to be herself, be honest, and help her friends, and stay true to her deals. And so that's how she's feeling. Tiffany does pitch to her, and she does want to keep Tiffany, but when she brings it up to Big D and Xavier, they say, no, we're not keeping Tiffany. So that's the end of that. Big D lets her know that she will have to, by the way, also, I'm going to put you up on the block next week if I win the HOH. She's like, what? Why do I have to go up on the block? And he's like, because, Azah, don't you understand? I can't put not you on the block. What are you thinking? Do you have amnesia? Okay. Hannah tries pitching to Azah, but Azah shuts her down, and Tiffany is voted out in week 11. Week 12 is another double eviction. Azah, and I call them weeks in the double eviction because they're elimination cycles, but it's not as fun to say it's elimination cycle 12. So it's a double eviction, baby. Azah wins the HOH this time, and she decides to nominate Hannah and Xavier. She's going after Hannah because of all those deals. Kyland wins the veto, and he takes Xavier down, which upsets Azah because what's up with that? Azah replaces Xavier with Big D, and Hannah is voted out. We get into week 12, where Xavier wins the HOH, and he nominates Kyland and Azah. Azah is upset at the men for disrespecting her HOH. She never would have done that. But it is what it is. With Big D off the block as the sole vote to evict, he tells Azah, I'm sorry, but it's time for me to evict you. She's like, what? She's like, yeah, sorry, I actually had a deal with Kyland this whole time, and I can't evict him. I've got to evict you. And she's like, oh, this is upsetting. And then Big D talks to Xavier, and Xavier's like, nah, actually, we should cut Kyland. And Big D's like, what? No, I love him. And Xavier's like, yeah, but should do it though anyway, right? And Big D's like, no. Maybe. And then Kyland pisses him off all week, and he's like, yes, I'm going to cut Kyland. And then he talks to Oz, and he's like, actually, so what I've actually decided is that I've changed my mind, and I'm not going to cut you. I'm going to cut Kyland. But man, let me tell you, Azah, you'd better be real grateful because I've been carrying you this whole game, and now I'm going to have to cut my best friend for you. This is so hard for me. And Azah's like, oh, it's hard for you to cut him, but it sounded real easy for you to cut me. He's like, yeah, because I didn't have a deal with you. Duh. I've been working with Kylan like this whole time, and he's played such a good game, and he deserves to be there. And like, I've been dragging you this whole game. So like, I just feel like you should be a little more grateful and a little more understanding and sensitive of my position because it really sucks. Okay. And I was like, uh, this is hurting my feelings. I am starting to decide that I would rather lose $750,000 than that you get 75. So how about that? Xavier wins the veto, and he keeps Big D off the block. Big D continues to get into fights with Kyland, and then complains to Azah that he has to vote him out. But he does eventually vote Kyland out of the game, and we head into week 14, where Xavier wins part 1 of the final 3 HOH, Azah wins part 2 of the final 3 HOH, and then all of that nonsense at the beginning happened. And that's how we got here. And that was Azah's game. Now, I mentioned in the Xavier recap that Azah was actually a bit more active in week 1 and, kind of moving forward than Xavier was. That is true. However, as I mentioned in Xavier's recap, post week 2, that very much changes. I mean, Azah is almost non-existent in most of the game. She is just kind of chilling. And not even really chilling. Just kind of stressing a lot. She is somebody that came into the game wanting to play a big, bombastic, like boomy game. She's a fan of June, and she came in. She's a fan of the show. She wanted to play this big game, and she immediately discovered that that's just not who she is. She is not that person. She is somebody that is very team oriented. She is very loyal. She doesn't like lying. She doesn't like being fake. And all of the things that the game requires of her are just not things that she enjoys doing. And so she instead decided to ride with the cookout, accomplish that goal, and just kind of be herself. The money is not important to her. The win is not important to her. What's important to her is staying true to who she is, and who she thought that was riding to the end with Big D. That she wanted to get Big D as far as she could in the game. Ironically, she is the one that wanted to carry Big D as far as possible. But Big D claims he has been carrying her. And that's really it. I mean, it's what I said. She decided that winning the game was not what she cared about, and that influenced how she operated in the game throughout the game. She stuck to deals. Whoever made a deal with her first was the one who made a deal with her. And as long as you don't like completely piss her off, even now she says, if Big D told me that we had a deal and you're breaking the deal, I wouldn't break the deal. But he kept telling me over and over that we didn't have a deal. So I guess we don't. And that's who Azah is. I mean, Azah, she can be a little mean sometimes to some people, like Hannah and Claire, weirdly. She got upset with Claire because when Claire was pitching to her, that Claire was like, "Don't you want to play the game, Azah?" But for the most part, Azah just has a huge heart and is just not meant for this game. She, I think that the casting producers, when we saw Azah's pregame stuff and Azah herself, all thought that Azah would come into the game playing something completely different than she ended up playing. But that's just not who she is. And so instead, she's here in the final 3, looking at a upwards of 50% chance to win the whole thing, $750,000, and has decided that because Big D has not been treating her right, she does not want to give Big D that second place check. And that, I mean, that is just who she is. That's how she's played the game all the way up until this point. I've been saying for, I think, upwards of a week and a half, that I do not think it's impossible that Azah decides to take Xavier based on how Big D is treating her and based on who Azah is as a player, which is why I was confused as to why Xavier wasn't pushing harder to make it happen. Now, Xavier, being who Xavier is, ends up getting it anyway. He's like, cool. But that's where we are here. Azah looking like she will be either second or third place in the game of Big Brother 23. And honestly, I'm hoping we'll talk about Big D's game tomorrow, but I'd rather it be second than third. So that's what I have for you here with Azah's game. Obviously, if Azah were to change her mind and take Xavier to the end, it's hard to discuss Azah as a winner because it's looking like she's not going to be a winner now. But if Azah did change her mind and decided to take Big D to the end instead of Xavier, Azah as a winner would obviously not be overly impressive. She didn't really play much of the game. She did not really do much to really almost anything to advance her own personal game. She did contribute to the cookout multiple times, and that's something that you should take away. Azah did not play a good self-interested game, but she did do some things, like according to her own standards, which was help my friends, help the cookout. She actually didn't play terribly. She did multiple things to advance the cookouts game, including the bonds that she created with Sarah Beth, with Claire, with Brittany, and with other non-cookout members. She was targeted by some non-cookout members, but not as many as Xavier was targeted by. And she made more bonds with non-cookout members than Xavier did. She also helped keep the cookout together much more than Xavier did. She helped talk Big D down multiple times. She actually helped talk Xavier himself down a time or two. And she was really the beating heart of the cookout all season long. She was very dedicated to the cause, and never once considered wavering from that cause in any overly serious way. I would say of all the cookout members, Hannah was the most steadfast and loyal to it, but Azah would be in second place. And so it's hard to really be too down on Azah, considering A, she has a much, much more accurate perception of her own game than the other two in the final three, and B, despite the fact that we may have wanted her to play more self-interestedly, that's never been what she has wanted. And you can't really force your own values onto somebody. If they want to be selfless, then they get to be selfless. And that was what she wanted, and that's how she played. So there it is. Obviously, she has not played better than Xavier in terms of a self-interested game, but she has played, more in line with her own perception and image and goals of herself, right? So there we are with Azah's game. I will be back tomorrow to talk through Big D's game, which, first of all, should be relatively quick. I mean, we got through this Azah one in about an hour. So that's, Big D's going to probably be even shorter, especially because there's probably going to be less to talk about in the update tomorrow. But also, it should be infuriating for you, and also funny, and also infuriating, and also ridiculous. So make sure you tune in tomorrow morning to hear what Big D was up to all game long, and I'll try and contrast and compare what he thinks he did versus what he actually did as we go, because I've heard plenty about what he thinks he did in the game, and it's quite humorous to see the difference between what actually happened and what he thinks happened. So tune in for that tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. I'll also update you on everything that happens today on the Big Brother 23 live feeds. If there's any change or update to this Azah, Xavier, Big D situation and who she's going to take, we will also be live tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern for the final roundtable of the season, during the season, where we will talk through the final Stock Watch ratings, as well as these final three and their games. A slightly more deep analysis into how we think they've played. And I'll have a survey out here on Twitter at Armstrong Taran. If you want to find that survey, I'll be tweeting it out sometime after this podcast. It'll be a longer one to build, so bear with me on that. But you'll be able to predict the jury votes, which should be one of the easiest jury vote predictions I've ever seen. But you'll be able to predict the jury votes and rate Kyland as a player overall. Where each winner would stack up for you. All of these fun questions here for the end of the season. Make sure you fill out that survey and give your thoughts. So thank you guys so much for joining me here today. You can also find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Taran Armstrong. I'll be going live to talk through the episode tomorrow. Watch it live with you as we watch through the finale. And post-season, you can find me on there. I'll be playing some games. I'll be talking about Big Brother. I'll be talking about TV shows. Answering questions, just chatting with you guys, whatever it is. Some people out there are like, hey, I miss hearing your voice, not during Big Brother. And I'm like, well, I don't know why that would be, because I don't know that my voice is that interesting, especially when it's not about Big Brother. But if you are interested in my voice, it will continue here over on Twitch or on the Survivor podcast that I do as well. So make sure you check out the Survivor content. Really, I do appreciate you guys hanging out here and listening to these game recaps. So thank you so much for that, and I will see all of you next time.